Greetings everyone. Welcome to Close to the Bones, where we continue with part 2 of Nina Angelo's story. In part 2, we witness Nina's deep faith and trust in life as we explore her career as an artist, writer and storyteller. She speaks of her Polish roots, her early beginnings, and how she found her way as a community artist, bringing her colourful magic into the lives of people all across these lands, from remote indigenous communities, across the seas, and as far as the Fiji Islands and beyond, an inspiring life journey of a woman following her passion. We begin at Margaret River in Western Australia, at the house of her good friend Margot Edwards, a playwright, director and community artist and activator, where Nina dedicates herself to writing her family memoir, Don't Cry, Dance. I would like to dive back in a little bit more, and I feel fascinated by this journey of Margaret River that you spoke of earlier. Why did you go to Margaret River?
Well, I have this really, really beautiful sister friend and another one who moved over there. One of them, Kathy Henkel, she's the director at Edith Cowan University. She's done amazing things. She's a sister from the stars too. We know. And I knew her role as a filmmaker because she filmed the Homage to the Elements we did. She filmed a whole lot, but I knew her role, she said, was to show the reality of what's happening. And now she's got students from all over the world and she can make that change. And I remember in 86 that she said that's what she wanted to do. So she's there, and another friend, we were all working on this Homage to the Elements, all lived here. She married a glass artist or glass blower in Margaret River called Zany Place, and he's amazing. And she's a writer and a playwright and a community artist too. And so she invited me. She had a little art residency there, writer's residence, and she invited me and I came and stayed there, set my computer up in the residency. I just totally, completely immersed myself in my story, in my father's story, in my mother's story, and it gave me that place away from everything. And because she knew how, I didn't know what I was doing. I've never done anything. She taught me. She said, first, any memories, put them on this. And she put up a big easel with a board. And she said, just put the sticker notes on there. Just anything you might think of, just put them there. And just sit down when I was doing mine and just keep writing, Nina. And she said, don't worry about the full stops and the commas and how it goes. Never go backwards. Don't go back. Just keep writing. And that was a great thing. So she was a helper, and I had someone.
She was like a writing doula for you, wasn't she?
Absolutely a writing doula. And she's the one that actually suggested that I should take my story out of the book now and just keep it complete as my mum and dad's story, and then my story can go into my book.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then that story goes into the archives.
Yep.
Into a different lens for different people researchers to look at.
Yep.
So the key element so far I'm getting in all of this is storytelling.
Yes.
And the importance of storytelling.
Passionate.
Yeah. Passionate. Extraordinary. And your mum, began, even though those files got lost, which must have been so heartbreaking.
It was her voice, I think, more than anything.
It was hearing her voice, yeah. But through you, that spirit lives on. Something that I've been thinking of as well is the connecting in and speaking to you about your Polish background, because that doesn't come into the fore very much. Is that...
Yeah.
Do you have any connection to that aspect of yourself?
Look, because we never did, I had my grandfather, we found, and he came to Australia, and he remarried a woman who was a doctor. She was my step-grandmother, because I never had a grandmother. She was a bit hardened, but she was a doctor in Palmer Street in Sydney, where all the prostitutes went to. It's really quite interesting. So I used to go when I would run away from home, or not really run away, but it was too much for my parents.
Take refuge there.
Her name was Peppy, and so I would just stay with Peppy, and she just dealt with me. So I was 8 when my grandfather died, but my mother's brother Roman, called him Theo Roman, obviously the Greek came here, Theo Roman, and his wife Thea Krisha. So it was their Polish, but that's how I called them.
Yes, so multicultural Australia, straight into the melting pot.
Yeah, they had, so we had the Polish family in Rose Bay who were all doctors, and Uncle Nick, my father's brother, who survived and came out when I was young too, with his wife Olympia. He changed his religion to Greek Orthodox because her family hid him. And so there was Nico, Olympia, and they had 3 kids themselves, Esther, Eric and Mary. So that was on that side. But my Uncle Roman had 2, my cousin Monica and Martin. Monica is a doctor too. She's associate professor of nuclear medicine at Prince of Wales Hospital. So they're my Polish family. She gets me. I mean, do they really get me? But they love me because I've always been But she's helped me with my book. She's been a big part of giving me information. And because my uncle was the one that kept the Polish history books, my uncle had that history, so he told me a little bit about when my grandfather, he was one of 7 boys, and a whole lot of them went over to South Africa. This is my connection with Mignon, which is really interesting, because Mignon, when I first met her at the first goddess conference. It was an invocation. Goddess invocation.
Invoking the goddess.
Invoking the goddess, that's right. Anik did it, Anik Duke. And I was asked to come and do screen printing with the women of the images, and that's how I happened to be there. And I don't go to these things. I never have. But I went because I was asked, and I'm passionate about story and story on fabric. I used to call it the fabric of our lives. Like every one of those things that you're leaning on, they're all being made by school kids in different places. That one there, all from different communities that I've kept it. But we were just that first night, we were all around, and they were sort of asking about story. And I kept looking at Mignon, and there was some familiarity in her face. She looked very much like my Polish side of the family. There was something about her. And then when they asked me for my story, and I told them a bit of my story, and then afterwards Mignon came up to me and said, "What was your family name?" And I said they were called Rosenberg. They changed it to Rossley, but they were called Rosenberg. And she said, "My great-grandfather, they were Rosenbergs too." And so when my uncle told me that some of these brothers of my great-grandfather, went to South Africa, and then she had that same look, and that's how we've called each other cuz ever since.
I see that. How extraordinary. I thought you were calling each other cuz because you resonated with each other. But actually that
she looked like my Polish family, and that they were all Rosenbergs as well. So I know when you haven't got much family, you sort of...
That is amazing. So, Nina, let's talk about the life in between. You've got the book. We've got the bookends, and in the centre. So, if you had to describe the woman that you have been all of these years, what would you call that woman? An artist, for example? Do you want to expand on some words?
Yes, I remember when I first felt comfortable calling myself an artist, because, I knew I was a creative, but that's a big thing to own. I'm an artist. And I do remember that. And I was always fascinated with fabric. Particularly, I remember women's dresses, and I was only little, and I'd look at the designs on their dresses, and I remember thinking, somebody made that up, and that person's wearing it. I thought, I want to do that. I want to do designs that people wear.
Yes.
And so that sort of, I was very young, because I remember my mum took me to this vocational guidance, when I was at school, trying to find out where you should go in the future. And I said I wanted to do fabric. And he said to my mum, "Look, dissuade her from that, because nothing was being printed in Australia then. Everything was come from overseas. There was nothing like that. And so, I went on and I did general art and all the rest of it. But that was my passion. That's what I called it, the fabric of our lives. And it's about our stories and what weaves us, the weave in the fabric of all our stories.
So you've spoken that these beautiful covers on these cushions that we're sitting with, that you work with children in schools. Where else have you worked and spread your magic?
I have worked over so many years because nobody else was doing it, you see.
And this is a screen printing?
Yes, it was. It started, so I didn't know. I just knew I wanted to put fabric. I did go to art school, and the only place in the 60s that you could learn was the dress design school at the National Art School at East Sydney. But I didn't want to do dress design. I didn't want to do any of that. I just wanted to know how to print. But I did a general art course, and then I went off and I worked for a couple of commercial artists or graphic artists and learnt a little bit more. But then, things went in another direction. But when the kids were really little, a friend came and said one day, "Nina, why don't you go to night school? I will come one day a week and I will look after the kids for you if you want to go back to the National Art School." And that was the biggest gift for me. And they took me into a screen printing course that they were doing at night. And I remember going in there, and the teacher, I had my little knife, and I bought the 3 colours and the screen, and he got me to do some cutting on this film. And he said, "You're very good with that. Have you done it before?" I'd never. My tool was this knife, cutting paper to make stencils, and understanding about the positives and the negatives. That's
how fascinating.
It's a really big thing in your mind. If you want that colour to come out, you had to take that out of paper. So it was challenging. I did it, and I had the basics. And then when I moved to the Central Coast, I had a studio or a garage at the back of my house in Terrigal. And so I set up the little bit that I had, and the kids started going to school, and then I started going in there and just playing. There were no books on it, there was nothing written, there was no clubs or groups of people doing it. But I was just determined, and I did have my 3 main pots of colour and everything. So I did all these fabrics, not knowing what would come of it. And I remember I thought, look, I need to take it down to the Crafts Council to find out whether it's worth my while to continue doing this. And I made an appointment to go down, and the project officer called me, and I remember an old suitcase, and I put all my fabrics in there, and I went down there and he opened them up. They'd never been presented with anything like that before.
How amazing.
It was the first time, and that's where I got my first job as an artist. I got a call from them as artist for 2 weeks in Hyde Park, representing the Crafts Council for the Festival of Sydney.
Oh, how wonderful.
And my job was to make these big banners, huge 3-metre banners, to carry down the main street during the parade on the environment. That was my very first job. And it was representing the environment. And I'm talking like 3-metre bits of material. And I went and got big screens, and I had to find a sponsor. That was the only thing. I had to find a sponsor.
They weren't sponsoring
they
you?
They said, look, we've got money to pay you, but we can't afford any of the equipment that you're going to need. And so I thought, well, this was the only mob that I knew that made the paints that I got at the school, art school. And so I rang Colourmaker Industries, who made the permaset paint that I used, and I made an appointment to see the general manager to ask if I could. And he rang and he said to me, look, I see that, you live, and my home is closer to you than if you come all the way to Monavar where their factory was and everything. He said, so come to my house in Pymble and we can talk.
In a more personal environment.
That's it. So I went into his house and he welcomed me, this little tiny Russian Jewish man. I didn't know, sat down, and I said, where are you from? And he told me that they were Russian Jews, and I thought, oh, good, I've got an in here. I said, oh, my parents, and I told them about my mum and dad, said they were Jews. And he just went straight away. He said, Diane, I remember this, he called to his wife in the kitchen, Diane, bring the girl a drink, anything you need.
Oh, how
Bang.
lovely.
Just like that, I was in. He said, I will call you, we'll have to put it to them, because I said, will you supply all the paints that I need? And you can put a big banner in Hyde Park for 2 weeks for the Festival of Sydney, and you can, have all the advertising, because they never advertised their stuff. It usually went to all the printing companies, the people doing T-shirts and things like that. And he came and saw me work there. So he did. He gave me anything I wanted. And then he came and watched me working with the community, and that's when I designed how to work with children and do simple things like simple squares in schools with kids instantly on little flag sticks, and they could make their own flags with their own design on it. And so I thought, well, if people are coming to me in Hyde Park, the kids can be doing that.
Wonderful.
And go with their little flags. We could do the bigger ones that we did at home, and some there, and then these kids walked down the parade carrying their little flags that they had done. I had no idea that I started something that there's so many things now that are made, in schools, tens of thousands.
That is amazing. So
that I've got.
Would that have been the beginning, really, of your community work?
That exactly.
Bringing art and creativity into the community.
The community came to me, and I've still got photos of them, a little kid, and they're printing with me right there in Hyde Park. And that was the beginning. And they saw Isaac Givorshna, that was his name. He came to see how I worked, and he bought his old father, who started Permaset. Permaset was the only company in Australia that made fabric paint.
Oh my goodness.
And in the Pacific, all the Pacific Islands. That's how I came to go to Fiji. They were the only ones. He brought his old dad along, and they were watching me work and watching the way I was doing it. Because they're just a factory, they're not there doing any art. And the next thing I know, they asked me if I would do a demo in a studio showing these simple techniques, because they'd made these little boxes with a little screen, 3-4 little colours, a squeegee, just what was needed to sell in Fiji, because people just wanted to do it, and they wanted to film me doing demonstrations.
So that is how that began,
that
journey.
So in the shops, they're in their big shops like Myers and all them, Morris Hedstrom's, all that in Suva, they'd call, and so that's how they took me over there as a consultant to the garment industry in Fiji. And they were all owned by the Indians, and they weren't used to dealing with women, particularly someone like me with all my crazy hair and everything. So that's my first connection with Fiji, and
you established relationships from that experience?
I was just with the Indians then, but they were doing, I was in all the papers, they were doing demonstrations, and hundreds of people would stand around me, and I had bought all my stuff and I had it all behind. In the meantime, they'd send me airbrushing things that I could try to do airbrushing on fabric, and I just tried anything, and so I had it all behind me, and I was doing demos, and everyone was interested. The Fijians, there's no art school over there. The Fijians so wanted to know how to do it. They loved their colour and their big flowers and everything. And so they were showing such interest, and I thought, why they're not getting any of this? The Indians have got it all wrapped up. And so that's when I applied for a grant, for a professional development grant from the Australia Council for the Arts.
Excellent.
Just before that, my house had burnt down. Like, I was gung-ho, anything I took on, but I got this professional development grant. I was artist in residence in Fiji for 3 months, and I learnt so much. And the printing, they took me out to islands where they do the ancient Marsi, the tapa cloths, because they printed over there, but they did the old printing on the tapa and how they make the tapa cloth. And you can see up there all those artworks of mine, they're all on the tapa cloth. They're all on the bark cloth. They beat it. So my friend came over and they did a documentary of me being over there called A Lasting Impression, a cross-cultural exchange between Australian community artists and the people of Fiji. And then out of that came 2 other documentaries called Tapa Tradition, where I went to the island where they make, because tapa is like for chiefs when any big things happen. And they took me out into the bush and cut down the tree and take off the bark and smash it, and it was all filmed, and the documentary, you know, and just people started getting to know I've got so much tapa cloth, I really need to.
I just think what a story from one woman engaging with her passion and her curiosity and the persistence, and how wonderful that your friend could do that babysitting for you.
That one time. You know, for 3
we can't imagine what can
weeks.
come through from a gesture of kindness.
You get it, yeah.
And what comes out from that. And is it true you've worked in indigenous communities? As well?
Absolutely. That was the biggest part. Because of that I did, and because I'm so experimental, and because everything I do has just come through me. I'd learned, it was all new, and I had so much enthusiasm, and I loved it. It was all about story to me, you know, going in there and putting it on the fabric. And so this organisation that I met when I was in Hyde Park for the Festival of Sydney, there was an organisation there called Network of Community Activities, and they actually represented all the before and after school hours and vacation care sector, and supporting the women which is always women that worked in that area. And I had all these new ideas, and for kids to actually go into a school in Wilcannia and the whole school's walking around with their own designs that they've made with me in each
wonderful.
class.
That's so empowering, isn't it?
Get in front of them and say, okay, you know, let's talk about a message. What do you want to say? Tell about your life. And some of the messages were just, I tell you, when doing this empowered people. Now remember, one young boy in Harden, Murrumburra, I was taken down there by this organisation. There was another one called Contact for Isolated Children, Families and Communities. That's how I came. I was travelling with them, and I would do the art with the kids, and they would then talk with the mothers. There was terrible drought at that time. There's a whole lot of kids who didn't even know what rain was. And the images that they did, I've got a couple of books here, because we're actually printing books and stories as well, was all dead skeleton of animals, because that's all they would see, these little children. And so I would go into all these communities and learn their stories.
Do you know, when you first started sharing this, you were speaking about making those flags as an environmental project?
Yes.
And then I'm thinking about the event that you hosted down here with the elements. What would you call that event?
That was called Homage to the Elements.
Homage to the Elements. It feels to me that the honouring of the elements of Mother Earth, planet Earth, you've been in service to that, and bringing that to people, and the ability to hold stories is a continuing thread that weaves through everything. And there's the word weave, that has taken you even beyond, what would you call it, the more modern, I suppose, the printing in that way, and taken you into the meeting of indigenous ways of working with the elements again to create beauty and connection. Because I'm sure that when you sat with those women, it wasn't just technique you were learning, you were experiencing them as whole humans and stories.
My first Aboriginal community was in Burke. I was taken there by the Flying Doctors. My role was, through these 2 organisations who were working with them, and they'd taken me along, I went over on the Flying Doctors for a week as artist in residence. The government had built a long day care centre for kids It was the first one that was for the Aboriginal women and the non-Aboriginal, for the Aboriginal kids and non-Aboriginal kids, because there were also always such terrible things happening in Bourke. I had no idea. You see, I never see people's colour or anything. I hadn't worked in an Aboriginal community. I didn't think of it any differently than any other community to me. And so I went in there with the women whose children were going to be using it. We printed the cushions, the cot covers, the curtains, anything that would give it a sense that this is our place, who they were. What makes your place different? What is it about your area that you're proud of?
So you actually furnished the environment you were teaching and sharing in
with the participants. So
that's
the women were learning how to do it. They were printing it with me, and I was like a woman possessed. Like I just had to. It was something else was pushing me.
It was that hair of yours.
It was that crazy hair, and the word got around, and that's how I met my really good friend, Riverbank Frank Doolan. Frank Doolan was a young Aboriginal boy, fully racist young man. He heard from his sister who was coming that it was around town that I was there. I stand out a bit. And he came in on the last day, and he's sort of walking around, with attitude. And I said, hey, hello, what's your name? I said, Frank. And I said, what do you do, Frank? And he said, I write poetry. He said, I'm a poet, which he said very shyly. And I said, really? I said, I'm a poet too. I said, will you share some of your poetry with me? And I'll send you some of mine from the ocean, because I live right on the ocean. Couldn't be further away from Bourke. And so I was packing up, I was getting ready, the plane was waiting, just about to get onto the plane, and he comes up and he hands me an envelope, and he gives it to me and goes away. I get on the plane is cruising, I pull out this envelope, open it up. There was a few poems. The first poem that I pulled out was called Black Woman, My Mother, the Earth. And I remember it. I'll just read the first verse of it, because it will always stick with me, because it was incredible. And it goes, black woman, my mother, the earth, soul of my substance, the rich red dirt, coloured blood red by a black man's blood, preserved for eternity by your endless love. And I'm on the plane, even I say it now, and all the hair stood up on end of my neck.
Goosebumps.
And I went, my God, this is an amazing poem. And then I kept reading, and then the next one, I went, this guy's an amazing poet. This black fella, who was just all, shy and everything, was an amazing poet. So we started corresponding. I started sending him my water poetry, and he'd send me more. We go back 40 years now.
Oh, do you?
We are friends.
Oh, Nina,
we had a break.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we had a break. He is now known as Riverbank Frank Doolan. He is a very highly respected elder in Dubbo. His mother was from Dubbo, a Wiradjuri woman. His father was Gamilaroi from Bourke. But his father, he had a church background. So, Frank, he went through his racist days. He went to uni, did literature, writing, because he's so good, but he's so radical now. And the Australian magazine, about 4 weeks ago, the Australian, he was on the front cover. It's actually over there. And there's a feature article inside about Frank. He has become, everyone who goes to him, he's got his place there. He lives on the riverbank in an old caravan that was falling apart. The local member of parliament there, who loves him, who was the mayor, organised a GoFundMe, and within 2 weeks or less, they had $15,000 to get him a new caravan. The fireys bought him in a big water tank. So, everyone, he's right next to the mission that his mother and his grandmother and great-grandmother grew up in. And Frank and I, we've had a very interesting, very interesting friendship.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh my God! But I do admin on his Facebook page. I do, and he rings me at least 3-4 times a week.
And look at that. I mean, who knows, what influence we have on people. Maybe his life would have been different if you hadn't have said, asked him about what his interests were, and being a poet, and you being a poet, and you actually reading his writing.
Yep.
And being moved by it so much.
Everyone that does. So on his page, you'll put up his poetry. He's renowned. When he does all the welcomes to countries, which he does a lot in Dubbo, he always recites one of his poems, always tells the story. He's the storyteller. He is, I call him the black elephant that got out of the room. That's what I call him.
I love that.
Because he's a black fella who people feel comfortable to walk, white people who often don't know how to be with Aboriginal people, and all their guilt comes up and they don't know exactly, but he is just so accessible. Actually,
we'll have a look in a moment.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
I love that story. Gee, there's so many
stories.
First
Aboriginal community.
So I asked you, what would you call yourself, and would you call yourself an artist?
Yes, and then I said that was when. Yes.
Storyteller?
Yeah, I did. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you've been creating these wonderful workshops from a rock to a heart place.
With the ART in big letters.
ART.
And the alchemy of story, art, forgiveness and healing. Yeah. And we go into, at the beginning, and the women know this, they hold that rock, they pick a rock, and they talk a story of when they were young and that impacted on their lives. And it's often the first time they feel safe to share it. And that rock, when they're telling that story, I get them, when they arrive, and I do it on Dangar Island because there's something special about being there. They put their story into the rock, and their tears flow, and they collect their tears in the rock as well. And that rock takes their tears, their story, and after the stories have been shared safely, then we go in, I blindfold them, and with music, 5 pieces of music, 40 seconds each, 5 little bits of paper, honey, not very big at all, with a pencil, blindfolded. They listen to the music and do it. I do an exercise taking them from their left brain to their right brain. Again, it's something that's been channeled through me. How that analytical, judgmental side of the brain that you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I can't draw.
It's the critical brain.
That's it. It's that monkey brain that criticises
it's
and
paralysing.
judges. So this, and again, I thank them so much, because I take them on a journey from that side to that side, and they can see the difference, that creative side. And then there's no judging, and they're blindfolded. And then they do this, and then the music changes, they do it again. When we finish, take the blindfolds off, I play the 5 bits of music, but they pick 3 colours because they've got to put a colour to each one. As soon as they hear it, I say, if you've got to think about it, your left brain's coming in, right? Just first colour, they pick the colours and they go back over it with colour, and then I get them to select a little portion of one, a full one, whatever they want, and that gets put onto their rock, and that's their forgiveness rock, and they spend the afternoon painting it.
What a beautiful process.
Yeah, painting it, doing it, holding it. So it's got their story, their tears, and the music and the art, and they go, and stories I've heard after.
And also they've been heard, that story's been heard.
That's right.
So as I'm listening to your words and I'm all about the overview, the pattern of everything, how everything flows. I'm seeing that this being from the stars needed to have the conditions that she needed to come in to manifest love, forgiveness and beauty to many people, but it couldn't have been done without that story. No. And you've alchemized the wounding and the pain and the trauma through the way you've processed it within you and the gifts that you've given out in service to the community and those around you. So I feel that this could be a good place to start maybe wrapping up. But I thought, how about we end with that mantra that you spoke of in the beginning? Because I know people will be thinking, oh, there's a mantra, I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Would you be able to share that with us now?
Oh yeah, I would be so happy to. And just explain that, 35 years ago, a spiritual mother came into my life, an amazing woman who was a star woman herself. Her role on the earth was to be the lighthouse on the coastline for the craft. And I met her, she met me, and she knew me. I think I was a child of hers in past life. And she took me under her wings. She taught me how to protect myself when I'm traveling. She taught me how to protect from bad energies, how to become invisible. Because my hair was so wild, people would say, where's Nina? And she's taking her hair for a walk. Like they would see my hair coming before me, things like that. And so it was a huge part of who I was. So she gave me instructions, little CD tapes that we can go on the internet for now. And I played when I was travelling, protecting my car, protecting all this stuff. So she said to me, Nina, when things are really getting tough around you and you'll see things, you'll experience things, this is your mantra. And it will take you back to your real self, who you are. And this is for you. And she told me the first part of it. And then just recently, the 2 lines came in and clicked in. And I always thought there's a part of this missing. And I'm so happy because it's so complete. I asked her in spirit when COVID was going on and people were in trauma and all the problems that were coming up, if I could share this mantra with others who I felt needed it. And I called her in and she said yes. And so this is how it goes, and it's your I am. And remember, this is the I am. And you start with, I am not my body. I am not my mind. I am soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am truth. I am grand design.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I sat with that myself, and the way you held it with your voice as well. And it's such a good reminder in a world of chaos and separation and doubt and anxiety to come back to ourselves being spirit, pure spirit.
And that's all we can do, because we can't affect anything that's going on around us.
No.
But we can pull ourselves in and know that our soul and our spirit, that is who we really are. Our body's going to go. Our body will deteriorate. It's getting older, etc. But our spirit will always be there. And I learned that when I was going through my lymphoma journey. So I hope that helps.
Oh, thank you, Nina. It's been such a pleasure to be with you today and to hear these stories. I felt like I've been watching an incredible series. And also thank you for being in this sweltering heat. We've had to turn off all fans and shut the doors to try and keep out the background noise. Thank you so much.
We should. Thank you, It was my pleasure, and thank you for caring enough to even invite me to be part of this.
Oh my goodness, it's an honour to be with you.
Oh, it's mine too.
Thank you.